Good afternoon, friends, and all the colleagues from the Indian ICT industry. A very, very warm welcome on behalf of CyberMedia and Dataquest to the 27th Dataquest Annual Awards to felicitate the leaders of the Indian ICT. Earlier we used to say IT, but now the Indian ICT industry. I hope all of us, we used to have the housekeeping rules earlier, but I think that has changed now in the context of everybody working from home and all these activities and events and presentations happening from home. So I hope all of us have got the right and enough bandwidth to continue to participate in this. And we have adequate light on our faces. And we are sitting in a reasonably quiet place. Thank you so much once again, and welcome to the Dataquest Awards function. As you know, we have in this three main awards: the IT Person of the Year Award, the Pathbreaker Award, and the Lifetime Achievement Award. But because we are doing this digitally this time, online this time, so we have decided to split it. And you know, attention span is shorter on online, so we have decided to split it into three parts. So we are having the Lifetime Achievement Award function this afternoon, and subsequently we will have the IT Person of the Year and the Pathbreaker of the Year awards also. The Dataquest Awards are very well known in the industry. I don't need to tell the people here about it, but just very quickly, they have been there since 1993, I think, if I remember correctly. So that's almost 27 years now. Traditionally, we have organized these in Delhi, but once in a while, we have done this awards function it used to be a gala awards dinner and celebrations. We have done this in Bombay and Bangalore also. In 2014, I think we had, I think it was 2014, we had Prime Minister Narendra Modi as the chief guest for the awards function, where he sort of proposed the famous theory that earlier civilizations used to settle next to rivers, but in this era and going forward, civilizations will come up in places where there are digital highways. So this awards is basically for recognizing and felicitating and honoring the lifetime contribution. And what we normally do is that we have a jury of very, very eminent people who get together, and before that we seek nominations from the industry, from our readers. For the various categories of awards, we seek nominations, and all those nominations are then filtered and and put together by the editorial team of CyberMedia and Dataquest. And then those names are presented before the jury, and the jury then deliberates and discusses and debates on those names, and the award winners are selected. The lifetime contribution, as you can very well figure out from the name, is basically to recognize and honor the person who has really made a big impact on the Indian IT industry, which is now a global brand, recognized world over, one of the most significant contributions to the world from India. So this award is primarily for somebody who has really spent his lifetime in building the industry. And if I can tell you who were the jury members this time, so we had a very, very distinguished jury like every year. And we had this time we had Mr. Arjun Malhotra, who was the last year's lifetime contribution winner. He was the chairman of the jury. Besides him, we had Ritesh Agarwal, founder of Oyo Rooms, also as a jury member. And then we had Mr. Ajay Prakash Sahni, secretary of MIIT, Mr. C.P. Gurnani, CEO of Tech Mahindra, also present here. He was also a jury member. We had Devdeep Sen Gupta, who was at that time the MD of SAP India, and Dr. Gulshan Rai, who was then the national security, IT security chief of the country. And Karan Bajwa was there. He was at that time heading IBM in India. Mr. Som Satsangi was there, MD of HP Enterprises in India. Besides Mr. Pradeep Gupta, chairman of CyberMedia, and Thomas George, the managing editor of CyberMedia. So these were the jury members, and past winners we have also the list of the past winners of the IT Lifetime Contribution Award is also very impressive. Some of these people went on to be awarded the Padma Awards, and many of them are now actually leading giant global IT conglomerates. So some of the names, if I can share with you, Mr. F.C. Kohli, one of the founders of TCS, Dr. N. Sheshagiri of DOE and the Department of IT, Professor Rajaraman, Major General Balasubramaniam, Mr. Sam Petroda, Mr. Dr. Vijay Bhatkar, Mr. N. Vittal. Then we had some of the other names in this was Mr. Saurabh Srivastav, Mr. Nandan Nilekani, Mr. Vineet Nair, Mr. Ashok Suta, and obviously Mr. Arjun Malhotra himself. So these have been some of the illustrious winners of the IT person of the Lifetime Contribution Award. Now that we are presenting these awards, and we have got some very senior people, the stalwarts from the industry who have assembled here with us. So we thought we will not let this opportunity go, and therefore we have also kept a panel discussion to talk about the 40 years. These were the people who have actually been instrumental in building the IT industry, and we thought we will not let this opportunity go without picking up the brains of such illustrious builders of Indian IT. So we have a panel discussion which will be moderated by PG. The panelists this afternoon are Mr. Rajendra Pawar, the founder of NIIT and also the founder of education IT, somebody who built the IT education sector in the country. The other panelists that we have are Mr. Arjun Malhotra, one of the founders of HCL. Again, HCL, as you all know, was one of the pioneers of IT sector in India. And Mr. Malhotra, besides being one of the founders, was also a very passionate promoter of entrepreneurship. And he brought in that entire culture of entrepreneurship in the company. And as some of you might know, he is himself now, after all that he did, he is now an entrepreneur himself. And we also have with us Mr. C.P. Gurnani, again a veteran, doesn't need any introduction like the other two panelists, who's really been instrumental in giving the name and the prestige to the Indian software industry. He is now heading a very large Indian IT services company, which is now the reason for the success behind a lot of other multinational companies the world over, including British Telecom. So we have very illustrious speakers today, and we are going to talk about how the last 40 years have been in the Indian IT industry and what do the next 10 years look like. In between, we will also have some messages from our friends in the industry, including messages from Mr. Chandrasekharan N. Chandrasekharan, who's the chairman of the Tata Group now. Messages from
Ibrahim, can we speed up, please, and can we come to
so
the
I think the
videos?
messages will be there. So I will now hand over to PG to talk to these founding fathers of Indian IT, and I hope it will be a very, very interesting discussion. PG, over to you.
So thank you very much, Ibrahim. Can we play the jury video, please?
I'm sorry, at a very nice point. I mean, we've got new technologies, you've got AI, you've got machine learning, you've got cloud. A lot of that is going to come in and disrupt the whole industry the way it is. So I just see a phenomenal amount of growth, phenomenal amount of change that's going to come into the IT industry, not just 2020, but beyond that too. So I'm very upbeat about it. So it was very interesting. I think we have, it's getting more and more difficult to try and identify winners in each of the segments. I think we had a very interesting discussion between all the jury members. The good news is that we were somewhere, there was a major consensus on most of this, but it was very close. And, there are a number of great people, great companies that are doing amazing things in India. And I feel sorry for the next jury. They're going to have a much more difficult time than we had in trying to select winners.
So what is your outlook for Indian IT industry for today?
So digital technologies over the next decade is going to create an economic value of $1 trillion in India. 2020 is a step towards that direction. Now today, we're truly a digital nation with digital technology embracing across all spheres of industries and all activities of life. Actually, the jury was pretty well distinguished, and it had a mixture of young entrepreneurship as well as experienced business leaders. And it was pretty enriching personally for me and for the overall interaction. I think we had a very, very productive day and a productive session.
As you know, we are in the era of digital transformation. So most industries are now trying to digitize some part of their entire ecosystem. When you are doing digital transformation, technology is at the core of all of this transformation. So you are really looking at adopting technologies like blockchain, IoT, AI, ML. And what's really happening is, as these companies are trying to go and adopt these technologies are now getting easily available on the major hyper-scaler cloud platforms, which means that most of the innovation and the creation of new platforms and new models and new innovative chargeback mechanisms is all happening very, very fast. So when you really look at the proliferation of all of these technologies in the industry, which is giving rise to new industries, new business models, I would want to say that the outlook is very, very positive. I think the overall experience was very good. What happens typically when you have so many different people from different business segments come and talk, there are insights that you tend to take with you, which you never had. For example, we got a great insight on how Swiggy operates and what's the kind of business model and business process difficulties and complexities, and what is the kind of employment that they've generated in the country. Now, these are the things that are great takeaways from such sessions. Also, you get an opportunity to hobnob with someone like Arjun Malhotra, who's been a veteran in this industry. So, absolutely exhilarating experience and a lot of positive takebacks for us.
So, welcome to the 27th edition of Dataquest Awards. Dataquest, since its inception, started recognizing the movers and shakers of the IT industry. I remember when the industry was a very, very small industry. It was under 100 crores. Today, it is billions of dollars, great market capitalization. But most importantly, it has affected the lives of each and every Indian by making fundamental changes to the way we live, the way we act, the way we behave, the way we go about doing our business. This has been possible because of the contribution that have been made by the people who have made this industry happen, our award winners.
So that was a word from the jury. So first of all, to begin today's proceedings, I would like to congratulate Raji on the Dataquest Lifetime Achievement Award. Raji, our journey goes back a long time. IIT Delhi, HCL are shared stages of that journey. Many friends also share the sentiment and will be joining us over the next hour, in which we actually are discussing 5 decades. Now, trying to capture 50 years in an hour is a challenge, but my fellow panelists believe in brevity as the soul of the wit, and we will capture the milieu of those times in 3-minute replies. To begin with, I first want to invite Mr. N. Chandra, chairperson of the Tata Group, to say a few words. Ashok, can we have Mr. Chandra, please? Ashok, can we have Mr. Chandra, please?
Sir, there is some issue. I'm trying to fix that.
Okay, so can you put me back on? What we will do is we will start off our discussion. 80s was the time when the foundation of this industry took place. This was the time when IBM had left, microprocessors had arrived, some bright youngsters had a dream. But Indian business was highly controlled at that time. Arjun, at that time business was something that was not really looked up to. So what was it like in terms of regulations? What were the challenges faced? I know you can talk for hours on that, but may I request you to capture what was the essence of those times?
So PG, it's a good question. We lived in what was called a license Raj. That means anything you had to make or anything you had to sell, you had to get permission. And the government decided what the market size was, and they sort of gave permission to 120% of some number, but only 80% produced. So you lived in an economy of shortage. So when we decided to leave DCM and start HCL because microprocessors, we thought microprocessors were going to change the world. We realized they couldn't get a license to manufacture computers. So that was reserved for state and public sector. So we actually signed a joint sector agreement with the UP Electronics Corporation, Uptron, as that was their first venture, which is how we got the name Hindustan Computers Limited, because we chose it. Every other Uptron company and venture was Uptron something or the other. And that's why we had UP as our home state. And fortunately for us, Noida came up right then, and Noida was a part of District Bulandshahr. So basically what we did was set up our factory there. Now I'll give you a quick story just to tell you what the life was like and how naive we were. When we made our first 8-bit machine, the HCL 8C, we took 30% advance, 70% the check was given when the person came to the factory, saw the machine, and then we packed it and shipped it to them. So the first machine had to go, and we were packing it when someone said, "Have you paid your excise?" And so we said, "What's excise?" And they said, there's a production tax in India, and it's either paid ad valorem, which is as a percentage of the value, or by weight, because transformers went at 4 annas a kilo by weight. So we called the excise inspector. We couldn't find it in the book, the excise manual. So he said the way to do it is you write to your administrative ministry. They will send a letter to the finance ministry, who will then give a classification and tell us how to do it. And we told him, "You're crazy, 2 ministries, it's going to take 4 or 5 months. I have to deliver the machine in a day or two." He said, no, this is revenue generating for the government. It will get done in one day. So we went, I remember it was a Saturday half day in those days, and we presented to Department of Electronics, which had just come up. And after the presentation, we were told that, the microprocessor policy has still not been decided. We expect it will take 4 years. So please come back 4 years later, and then we'll write to the finance ministry for you. So, we went back very depressed, had a look at that manual in detail. Fortunately, they were under import substitution. We used to get electromechanical accounting invoicing machines from East Germany, a company called Robotron. And there was a photograph of a keyboard, a small display, and a printer. And so we showed that to the excise guy and said, isn't it the same? And he said, yes, it looks the same. So for 4 years, we cleared our computers as accounting invoicing machines, even sold one to the Department of Electronics. But that policy did take 4 years. So I just wanted to give a flavor of the kind of environment we were in when we started HCL in 1976. Interesting times. I think you're muted, PG.
I'll unmute myself. Yes. Sorry. I mean, that really brought some old memories back to me. CP, you were not in the IT industry at that time. This is the time when computers were still luxury goods. It was a fancy thing to have. Some few politicians understood what IT was and were trying to push it, and they were referred to as the Gang of Four. Tell me, from an outsider's point of view, how did you look at the IT industry and what made you shift to this industry?
I can answer the last question first, which is what made me shift to the IT industry. I was dating Anita, who used to work for NIIT, and Raji was God then, and Raji is still God. And so clearly, I couldn't live in Jaipur and work for Fenner India Limited. So that's how I really shifted to IT industry. But I think that's the best decision I took in 1986. Since then, I haven't looked back. But if you ask me what really prompted me, it wasn't really only Anita. I think the reality was that the computers had started becoming what I would call aspirational product for a corporate. And very few people really understood what the benefits are, but it clearly were influenced that a microprocessor based a PC was now available, and obviously a company like HCL, which launched BusyBee that year, created full page advertisements and brought in an awareness in India. So I can only say is it was for the ride that I came in. Number three, from a user point of view, when you got in, people, you had different stories. It was still very, very hardware centric. The different stories were, is it a better calculator? Is it a, one floppy machine or a two floppy machine? And number three is a government product better or a Hindustan computer product better? Because the whole of Department of Electronics had come in, CMC had come in 86, NIC had come in, but the world really stopped around these three government bodies to actually talk about computerization. And I'm happy that I played a role because the industry continued to evolve. And to a large extent, that famous story, when I met Raji and Shiv together, the famous story was that Raji started NIIT because the world was manufacturing computers, read as cars, but there were no drivers. And hence the need for the education sector for computer industry.
That's a wonderful story, CP. Yes, I do remember NIIT used to have a dating allowance. I'm sure you were also one of the beneficiaries of that allowance.
I mean,
I believe.
like anybody else, I have 1,000 stories about eating in front of South Extension, but I think we'll leave it for some other day.
Absolutely. I believe the message from Mr. Chandra. So can we please connect Mr. Chandra? Ashok, can you please connect Mr. Chandra? I'm sorry, we are having some problem with the audio. Okay. Can the tech team just see what really is the issue and can they set right the audio, please? In the meantime, I shall continue. So Raji, as CP just now said, there was a complete lack of manpower. How did the idea of NIIT take birth? What were the seeds?
I think as CP let the cat out of the bag by saying that in HCL, then there was DCM and ORG were making computers, and after that Wipro. So computers were getting made. That was becoming clear, and they were becoming the big story in town. But everybody soon realized that while we'll have the computers, we won't have people to run them. So this used to show up in our corporate planning sessions in the SWOT analysis as the biggest threat. And sitting there in the function of corporate planning, as I was thinking about this threat would block the growth of the industry, and then should this not be a great opportunity? So in a sense, the seeds of NIIT were born by realizing that the crucial block to the growth of IT would be talent, and therefore why not look at that as an opportunity? So the mission statement we made was quite simple of NIIT was bringing people and computers together successfully. So we started off. We soon realized that you need people to create people who will then run computers. So where's the faculty? Now, being engineers, we figured we'd have to find a technical solution. So we introduced the color TV in India, was pretty much the first one. So we bought a 29-inch Oneida TV, I remember. It was the biggest you could get, a color TV. And we bought a huge old Sony VCR, the 3/4-inch U-matic. Big thing it is, because we got imported videotapes of people teaching COBOL and Fortran and so on. So we thought, till we get the teachers, let's use technology. And so therefore the launch was a multimedia. We used the term in 1982. The ad we put was, if you have a college degree and no job, this ad can change your life. And the idea was, young, fresh graduates, come into this field and build a future for yourself. But very quickly we discovered that while there was a lot of interest, a number of constraints came in front of us. So really speaking, the decade, the early part of the 80s was about solving one constraint after the other. So the first, of course, was getting technology to get teachers, but then we had to repurpose school teachers. So at a very large scale, we ran faculty development programs to convert school teachers into computers teachers in the classroom. And then we needed talent, knowledge, and we looked at the medical education where the doctors teach and they also practice. So we thought we'll consult, learn the subject and teach. So we became the biggest recruiters of IIM MBAs in those years. In fact, 1985, I remember, out of 19 MBAs who majored in systems at IIM Calc, we hired 18. And these youngsters came with their notebooks and sat in front of the chairman of Indian Oil and the others, helping them figure out how to build an IT plan. But through that consulting practice, we then created knowledge which we brought into the classroom. So the whole medical education model of practitioners creating content and bringing it into the classroom was put into use, but then we had to scale. So the next innovation was how to scale into small cities. And we then thought of creating a franchise model, which had been tried for McDonald's and so on, but never for a service. So the franchising of education as a model was what we created in '86, and that helped us to scale significantly all the way, reaching at one time to 2,000 locations. But there was also policy shortage, I think Arjun talked about. So in a sense, fortunately for us, when Rajiv Gandhi arrived on the scene in 1984, the first policy he announced was the computer policy, 84. And 86 was the software and manpower and software policy. So these two policies at a government level, but I also want to tell you there was a policy taken by one of our wise leaders in the industry, Mr. Kohli, who created TCS, that we all know. He created a policy which helped us. He said that anyone who had been offered a job by TCS would not be joined unless they got a COBOL certificate from an NIIT center. We are indebted to TCS and to him because that was also a corporate policy which gave us growth. So this was an era of huge opportunity, many interesting problems to solve, and extensive innovation. And that's how the whole thing started off.
Great to hear, how Mr. Kohli, he's now 95 years, so, may he complete his century. Let me just check at the back end. Is the audio of Mr. Chandrasekhar, is it sorted out, or we'll just continue? I think we'll just carry on till I get a message from them that the technical issue has been taken care of.
Sir, please continue.
Okay.
There is some issue.
Sure. So we'll just wait for that. So Raji, you talked about building the entire basis for the software export industry, but the industry still had few people. You and I were part of that task force, the World Bank study, which was done in the early 90s. How did we end up gaining leadership? India was still looked down upon and so on. What were a few of the factors that made India achieve absolute eminence in this area of software export?
Well, essentially, it goes to the caliber of the people, I would say. I mean, essentially, that is it. The whole idea was, how do we reach young people and prepare them for the opportunity? And the talent actually showed itself. Now, we have to remember that opportunities opened in front of us. So 98 policy, Rajiv Gandhi, Sam Pitroda were great supporters. They gave us a lot of tailwind. But also came some people like Mr. Vittal, who opened the doors for us as we came toward the end of this first decade. And the world took notice because already work had been done by a few companies like TCS to prove to the Western world that there was a ton of talent in this country. So the whole idea was to prepare the talent, bring it to a certain level, and put it in front of the market opportunity. And the 90s, of course, we talk about that, was a period of great opportunity. But the 80s became the period when we used the domestic market, and we used consulting, and we used domestic customers for the whole industry to learn. And exceptionally bright people across all these companies who were there at that time with tremendous amount of energy and ability to attract the best talent from the institutions. So I think it was the talent story laid open because when computers arrived and the demand of them.
Yeah, you are right. So perhaps, a set of talent which was used that was probably, sort of a notch higher than what was actually required by the industry. Perhaps that is what happened during that time. Arjun, you went to US at that time. Not at that time, I think in the 80s, the US, you moved in with the story of hardware, but ended up doing software. How did that shift happen from hardware to software?
So that's an interesting transition. Actually, HCL's belief was that engineers should do R&D And, programmers should do programming, not engineers. Engineers were really for R&D. And we really recruited from the top institutes, the IITs, the so-called RECs, and what are called NITs today. And we really went to the US because of, again, those restrictions that I talked about earlier. India was aligned with the so-called Soviet bloc. And so US had restrictions on what they would export to India. And our people read the English magazines, so they know the latest microprocessors. So for example, when the 68030 came out from Motorola, we were only allowed the 68020. And so to give our customers the performance that they wanted, and we had a very, very strong R&D team in HCL, we made a multiprocessor machine, which actually was unique because internally it was a multiprocessor, but externally the user worked as it was a single processor Unix. So I didn't have to retrain the programmers per se. This, someone from AT&T came after they bought Unix, and they were very impressed because similar machines, I mean, obviously larger capacity, were available only for $1 million from Pyramid and MIPS in the US. Ours was a $100,000 machine. That's the price we thought we could get in the US. And they thought that there would be an opening. We got McKinsey to do a study, and we went to the US to sell hardware. We got a big order for $50 million as soon as we went there. And obviously, we were then working towards it. Unfortunately, multiple things happened. Yogesh Vaidya, who was one of the founders who'd gone there, had to go in for a bypass, which was not common in those days. He did say he'd get back to work in 10 days, but we thought he was going to overdo it. And so I was sent out there to make sure that he doesn't put too much strain on his health, basically. The order went south because the company that had given it to us got acquired by another company which wanted only Intel chips, not Motorola chips. And I was too new to the US to realize that if I'd gone legal, I would have made a lot of money. I came from an Indian context where you had to run a business, you wanted to run it properly. So we then went to a number of our people. I was sent to shut it down, basically. And we had actually moved people out to port the enabling technologies, the compilers, the databases onto our hardware so that we could sell it in the US market. And the way it was structured was, instead of paying for the port, we said the engineers were at our cost, and we will do the multiprocessor extensions to your machines, to your software, which is your IP, but it'll work on our machine. So when I decided to stop the hardware business, so to say, and close it down, everyone who was using our engineers said that they wanted those multiprocessor extensions. And we realized we had a unique knowledge of how to work multiprocessor, how to get performance from the disk, how to get performance from your, for other parts of the system, which people, even companies like HP didn't have at that time. And so everyone wanted the expertise we had. And so that's how we switched from being, in the US at least, from being a hardware company to actually selling our expertise as a consultant, very much like a lot of other companies were doing at that time. HCL stayed a technology-based services company for a long time. We only moved into applications, and I take the blame for that delay, is because I was never comfortable. We were always a technology company. We used engineers for R&D, not for programming. It's just that one of our Oracle guys who immigrated to Australia came to the US, and he told me he needed a job. He said, I'll run that business for you. And that's really how HCL got into the application business, basically. That's really the story behind how we switched from hardware to services in the US.
And of course, then came the Y2K opportunity. So CP, was it an opportunity which sort of just fell in India's lap? Was there just that we were at the right place at the right time? Walk us through that time period.
Again, one bug has stopped the world. The other bug that we are talking about could have stopped the whole financial institutions, the governments, the hospitals, and you name it. sometimes you have to be lucky. And the reason I'm saying we had to be lucky was that Y2K bug was inability of the computers to differentiate between the year 1900 and 2000. Clearly, India's advantage of having a scale of engineering talent, the good education system, did help us. Now, to gain credibility, every company had its own way of addressing it. Uh, Arjun used to be in HCL America. Arjun came across a company in Virginia called James Martin and Company. I mean, uh, the James Martin professor was very, very good at methodology. He did talk about the impending crisis because of Y2K. And we ended up working with James Martin, ended up acquiring James Martin and Company. But different companies, other companies made their own tools to migrate. Some people invested a lot, and maybe Raji's COBOL engineers became the premium engineers. But I look back and say why Y2K helped the Indian industry. And I'm sure, we at NASSCOM have often said, while Father Kohli helped create the export industry, but real recognition came to India because of Y2K. The reasons, again, number one, the regulator. Most of the regulators made it compulsory to mandatorily test the software. It was probably the most painful for the user organizations. And India Incorporated obviously was the first time actually going deep into the application software. Number two was that everybody started realizing they had millions of lines of code. It was never documented. Most of us don't realize post Y2K, we benefited because the documentation had taken place, that those quality processes or the CMM level now started looking real. I think if I look back, I can only say learning from this bug, and this bug means COVID-19 bug and the Y2K bug, that the public trust is sacred. It must be nourished during the times of the crisis. India Incorporated benefited because we not only delivered, but we maintained the trust of the client. So I think there is a lesson here for us in COVID-19, and that trust that we maintained in year 2000, if we continue, we will benefit in 2020 also.
I like that your analogy that it was one bug that was beneficial, and today we are looking at yet another bug. But Raji, just CP, just continuing with you. Then came the millennium. Internet flattened the world. This was the time when the entire industry started moving up the value chain, started moving from time and material to projects. There was a news area also that came up, which was IT ES industry. This was the time when there was, very strong growth of the entire Indian IT software industry. What was the role of manpower and how did that entire thing come about? Your views on that?
So, again, it's fun being on this panel because for a change, we are not discussing 5G and AI, and we are really discussing what brought us up to this point. When I look back, the other benefit of year Y2K was that we could never send so many people overseas. So the connectivity between the mainframes of the client and us, I still remember taking clients that Arjun will send from overseas and taking them on the top of the building to show that we have an antenna. And those dumb terminals that we would connect onto those mainframes, but we were working from offshore. So the fact is that offshore industry got into the multiply mode was because thanks to year 2000. And number two, I think around that time, I don't have the exact years, but it's around that time when American Express started moving its back offices to India. And American the Express gave it the first credibility that an ITS industry could be operated out of India. Obviously, the Pramod Bhasin and the Genpact story is very, very well known, that GE started their back office operations and Jack Welch had that famous dialogue 70-70-70. I personally believe that in a lot of ways, while ITS industry was being created, India's role in running an enterprise remotely, India's role in being able to do an application management remotely, and some of the Indian companies, on one end were doing the augmenting of the manpower, but some of the companies had started moving into managed services. And that is why when you see the growth curve, I don't remember exactly, but I think NASSCOM in the last February projected that India's exports was about $177 billion, and it has continued to grow. And this is really from a very small base. So when you start becoming such a heavyweight on the GDP, and when you start looking at how the customer's confidence continued to grow in you, that today we probably have about 1,000 global delivery centers of the customers based in India. That an IBM or an Accenture will have more manpower in India than anywhere else in the world. I think that is where our contribution to the global IT industry. More important is that we have continued to add value to a company, whether it is called an Intel or a Microsoft or an SAP or an Oracle or the top 100 companies in the world.
Thanks, CP. I'm told that the problem, the technical hitch that we were having is sorted out. Can we have Mr. Chandra, please?
Ravi is a true pioneer. He had a vision long years to develop the human capital in the IT industry to drive the nation's growth. He believed in two important things and demonstrated both. First, India had the human capital to solve its problems. And the second, the IT skills can be built. He founded NIIT in the 1980s on these two principles. Today, NIIT is present in over 30 countries and forms over 35 million learners. Raji is a true educationist at heart. He served on the board of governors of ISB and also founded the NIIT University. He helped shape the IT policy in India and around the world. Raji's contribution to education, the IT industry, and the nation at large is enormous. He is a role model for many young entrepreneurs to take a premise, build on it, and bring it into reality. Always executing, persevering, and making it better. I cannot think of anyone else to receive this Dataquest Lifetime Achievement Award other than Raji. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chandra. Can we also have the message from Debjani Ghosh, please? Okay, perhaps we'll just continue our discussion. So, Raji, the internet also changed the shape of education in the country, right? More formal education came. Also, there was democratization that happened in terms of, more people having access to information and so on. It also brought in focus on skills. Walk us through that shift that took place in the entire education system.
So the internet, as we know, came in 1995, and the speed at that time, you may remember, was 9.6 kilobits per second. Imagine that. In fact, we were the first to build a virtual university on the internet. We called it NetVarsity in 1996, only to discover that nothing moved on the screen. So in fact, we created NetVarsity, got our students to spend part of the time on it, but then we ended up sending them the floppy disk to their home with some internet material so they could simulate the internet. And even when we came to 2004, which is now the decade we are talking about, the speed was 256 kbps. In fact, 2010, it was 512 kbps. So in that whole decade, it was quite impossible to think of democratizing education through technology. It was not through online options. So democratization happened. The digital divide problem had been labeled and raised in the late 90s by many political leaders. S.M. Krishna, Chandrababu Naidu, Mrs. Dixit, they were all our students, by the way. We had the privilege of saying that. They wanted us to solve the digital divide problem. So we embarked on a number of things. Everybody's heard, I'm sure, of Sugata's work on the hole in the wall, which basically said, first we did the government projects. We did IT projects to teach children computers in village schools. And those were system integration projects, end to end. We took a room, we put up computers, we put the AC, we put the furniture, we sent a teacher, we gave the courseware to make sure that village children could learn. And in that decade, we trained 10 million young kids with physical classrooms and teachers, mind you. So democratization started, but not with the internet, unfortunately. The hole in the wall experiment actually said, what if you don't even have a teacher? So children in slums. So we connected computers. We got a very good funded project from the World Bank to demonstrate that you could indeed have children learn computers on their own. And then in 2007, we also started another experiment for democratization, which was in a small town called Chhindwara. Mr. Kamal Nath was then the minister. He said, look, you're doing big things in the cities. What about my small town? And we built what we then called the Model District Learning Center, where we worked with the local government, got some space, put some technology. We tried to do remote teaching. And we used such methods to reach the unreachable and the unreached. So I have to say that the leaders in the government were very, very conscious about the digital divide problem. And we got the opportunity in that decade of 2000 to 2010 to do a number of things to democratize. But I have to say, internet didn't help till we came into the next decade. That really was the reality.
Oh, yeah, but it did create a huge amount of connectivity. So, that was the big advantage. I believe, can we have the message from Debjani Ghosh, President of NASSCOM?
Than you for this award. Raji, you've been a friend, philosopher, guide to NASSCOM, and definitely to me. Pretty much from the beginning of the journey, right from the start, if I'm not wrong. You've been part of our executive council, you've been a past chairman of NASSCOM, and even today you continue to find the time for us and act as chairman of the Data Security Council of India. Raji, your contributions, your insights are always invaluable. your ability to get into depth of specific subjects, attention to details, and always, the willingness with which you make yourself available whenever we reach out to you, it means a lot. And to me personally, Raji, you played a very, very critical role in pretty much changing my life. You were one of those few people who played matchmaker between me and NASCOM. And I cannot thank you enough for it because joining NASCOM was one of those absolutely life changing moments for me. And I am ever so grateful to you for giving me that opportunity. As we enter the fourth decade for the industry, uh, this is a great time to take a look back at that time and place where it all started. At that point, we had a fledgling IT industry with very big dreams, ambitions of becoming a global superpower. The industry leaders at that time, including Raji, played a stellar role in articulating the advantage of India as an IT hub, the talent base that we had, the cost advantage we had, and how it all came together to give global companies, global Fortune 500 companies, the best partner that they could have for their digital journeys. And I have to give it to the folks who made it happen, including Raji, because they were so convincing. They believed in their power of their ideas to such a large extent that they were able to not just convince customers around the world, but they were able to convince the government of India that there's to realize the tremendous potential in Indian IT and take the steps needed to set up this industry. As we look at the moment in time that we are in today with COVID-19 pretty much disrupting all our lives, it's a great time to think back to the last bug that pretty much reshaped the Indian IT industry. And I'm talking about Y2K. That was a strategic inflection point for the industry and provided the industry with an opportunity to accelerate growth like never before. I do believe that today, once again, we are at that moment in time when we have a huge opportunity to reinvent and to reshape the industry and become the most trusted partner for the transformation for the world's business. And with people like Raji continuing to mentor us, continuing to support us, I do believe that this industry will emerge stronger from the crisis than ever before. And this one is pretty much ours to win. Thank you.
So, this decade, Arjun, also saw entrepreneurship emerging out of India. You were in Silicon Valley where the 90s, there was this huge wave of entrepreneurship and so on. And a lot of people got enthused by that. And therefore, this wave started here in India also. That first decade was really the formation of that big change in India. How critical was that?
So, I think we've got to go back to what the IT industry did for people. So, for someone like me, when I graduated from college, job security or getting a secure job was probably the most important thing. In fact, my parents were quite clear that as long as I was studying, they would support me. The minute I finished studying, I better support myself, find a job, right? So security was really important, which is one reason why I'm surprised we were able to think and start of HCL way back in '75. But by the time the IT industry had got to that point, I think that glass ceiling, that security glass ceiling for the middle class, had pretty much broken. You could talk to, when you went to an IIT or you went to colleges to recruit people, they would talk about starting something straight out of college. Just starting a company, becoming entrepreneurs, which was actually a new word for us. We didn't know what that meant when we started. But I think that was number one. And number two, you've got to remember that in India, technology is a strong point. And so when the internet came, suddenly you had a new technology that was going to change the world again in some way. No one knew in what way at that time and how quickly. But that allowed a lot of people who had strength and comfort in technology and knowledge in technology to get the, how should I put it, to get the confidence to then jump in and do something on their own. And I know at that time how much time we spent trying to tell people that go to market or going to market is also critical. It's not, you may have the best product in the world, but if you don't know how to take it to a customer and sell it, it's not going to go anywhere. But I think the combination of the fact that psychologically, the IT industry had broken the glass barrier, the glass ceiling for the middle class, and the fact that we had new technology like the internet come in. I think a combination of those two is what really gave a big boost to entrepreneurship in India at that time.
No, absolutely. I think those were the formative years for entrepreneurship in the country. So, Raji, let's talk about the last 10 years. And you did refer to NIIT University coming up in the late 90s and so on. You were actually, the NIIT was the first unicorn, I think, the first $1 billion market cap was reached by NIIT. And then EdTech took a sort of a backseat, and now it has emerged very, very strongly again. Was NIIT ahead of its time? What needs to be done in order to catch this new EdTech revolution that is taking place?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we like to look far ahead, very often too far ahead. So 1996 was Net Varsity. Then 2002, we launched NIIT Online Limited. Same kind of problem. 2013, we announced the Cloud Campus, which basically, by now, the internet speeds are coming to 512 kbps. And the Cloud Campus basically said that it's your place on the cloud. You can work from anywhere, you can collaborate with anybody, you can visit the lab online. So all of these things, by the way, the tools and technologies have been ready, but the infrastructure wasn't ready. And we do know that in the last, this decade, the MOOC phenomena started 2012. So the first few of them were a great source of excitement for all of us, except that they still couldn't get their business model right. That in the US, the infrastructure was okay. But everybody imagined that if you connect a learner to a device like it's happening on Zoom, then learning happens. Only to discover that learning is the most complicated process. And therefore, completion rates on free education online is 5 or 6%, leave alone when you start charging. So, but the good news is that I think many like us have dabbled with this. I mean, we started using, I told you, multimedia, which was a VCR and a TV in 1981. And then we were the first to use the laser disc. We were the first to use computers in training, the first to use web series. So we have been, let's say, time has been trying to chase us, if I can put it that way. But we've come to a point where the cumulative experience which we've gained is now with us. So the university, NIIT University, which we conceptualized in the late 90s, but started only in 2009, is predicated on the reality of technology being the infrastructure. So NU Digital, in these days of COVID time, we have our students who have a much better time than the others. Similarly, NIIT, the whole idea of physical infrastructure has become less and less and less relevant because learners want to learn wherever they are, whenever they are, on whatever device they want. And therefore, commuting and changing. We used to have an ad at one time in NIIT that Mr. So-and-so left from home, changed this bus and that bus to reach our NIIT center. That was the USP. Now no one wants to do that. So now people want to learn online. So we are in the process of launching NIIT Digital. But it's not just about Zoom. I think the education process is far too complex. And we are hoping that all that we've learned through these early experiences, now that time is catching up with us, we will have the opportunity. But I do want to say that the global digital platform for our corporate customers, that's now 80% of our activity. 80% of our activity now is for the 50 of the Fortune 500 companies, the Unilevers of the world, for whom we are doing their internal training remotely. And we are one of the 2 global companies or pure play training companies in the world and growing faster than the other player. So while the B2B model is in place, is now the B2C, the NIIT Digital that we're looking at, and of course NIIT University Digital is with us. So we actually are looking at COVID, and I think Debjani made a very good point. This bug, and I'll talk about that a little later, is the next opportunity for India.
Yeah,
and
so just
the world is going digital.
Just hold that, because that's the next 10 years, and I think that is very critical. What is going to happen as far as the future is concerned. We have a message also from Rishad Premji. Can we play that message, please?
Sorry, sir, there is some technical glitch with his video as well. So can you continue with the discussion? Meanwhile, I'll manage that. Sir, you are on mute. PG, sir, you are on mute.
Mute. Okay. Raji talked about how the education industry has changed. CP, similar changes have taken place in the software services industry as well. So what do you see? How can we move up the value chain? What is the agenda? What have been the last 10 years for the entire industry?
In a lot of ways. So let's take the few events that have taken place. Number one, that a TCS would have a more than $1 trillion market cap, or many of us would be managing critical services. What was earlier called, the fault tolerant machines now became hardware, became software, and software also the level of fault tolerance that had to be provided. That means you had to give 99.999 level of uptime. India Incorporated has continued to move up the value chain. There is no newspaper in the world which will not talk about the India's capabilities. There is no new product in the world, whether it is an aircraft or a washing machine, or whether it is an automobile or any Fortune 500 company or the top 10 tech companies which today can claim that they do not have an India inside. I mean, the joke in the Silicon Valley is it is not only India inside. I mean, if you ask too many questions, you will find Indian CEO inside. So moving up the value chain, I think, is almost an everyday process. And why am I using this as an everyday process? If you remember, Cognizant Technologies came up with this slogan, 2 in the box, which was really saying is that we will put in an account executive and also put in a delivery executive right in front of you. The same Cognizant came back and said it is 3 in the box. Why it was 3 in the box is because now we can also consult for you. We can also do your high-level design, and we can now create what is called an end-to-end service offering from consulting to maintenance. Coming to the new world, almost everybody that you talk to is talking about migration to digital, migration to cloud, migration to 5G, migration to AI. Similarly, if you probe further, then how do you make your business digital? How do you modernize so that your business becomes digitally native? And the good news is that India Incorporated is part of those conversations. And when you look back and look at the acquisitions a McKinsey or a Bain or a BCG have made, they bought more technology companies in the last 5 years than they have bought consulting capabilities, which effectively means is that today's environment calls for a technology as the layer. And personally, I'm very encouraged when people start using India example of an Aadhaar or the Jan Dhan Yojana, when a geo platform is now discussed in every boardroom around the world, that we would be able to combine a native technologies and be able to create a velocity in every kind of a digital marketplace. It just gives you the confidence that India's Aadhaar is an example of a database of such a huge size, secure and serving the people. I think the next leap has to take place. Whether the next leap is happening in education, healthcare, I'm sure, PG, whenever we are ready to talk about the next decade, there are many, many ideas that we can throw on the table.
Absolutely. And incidentally, we are ready with a message which is from a former brand ambassador of NIIT. So can we play that video, please?
I first met Raji in 1999 when I began working with NIIT. And one of the things that struck me right away was the calm around him. And soon I observed a lot of very good leadership qualities. There are very few things that really ruffled him. The first thing I noticed was his passion for education and for overcoming the digital divide. For him, computers weren't only about IT, they were about education. I remember in 2000, he had a conversation with the president of the World Chess Federation, who mentioned that in his region, he had introduced chess in schools and this produced much better academic outcomes for his students. And Raji's eyes lit up. And one of the things he immediately focused on was whether we could launch the same thing in India. Within a year, they launched the 9 Champions Academy. Quite a few champions have emerged from this academy where we make chess available to students all across the nation. His passion for education and IT was very important in the 80s. And during this pandemic, I think we can appreciate the foundation that was done then. India is so much better prepared for all the communication tools and the IT that we need because of this work. I also see him as a mentor. And I remember one conversation where a couple of times in my career when I had difficult moments, I consulted him. And in 2013, I was in one of the lows of my career, having lost my work life. And Raji told me to take stock of my life and then how much had gone right. And this was just one setback. I could shrug it off, and he was right. The last 6 years, I have been playing chess, and in fact, there was much more left to do, even after losing my title. I have enjoyed knowing him personally at many levels, not only professionally. I have visited his family many times. They're very close, and I've always enjoyed his sense of humor and the warm times we've spent together. My congratulations to Raji on his Lifetime Achievement Award. All the best.
Thank you very much, Vishy, for those wishes, and I'm so happy that you were able to take some time out and be with us on this day. Arjun, we were talking about entrepreneurship. In the last 10 decades, Stand Up India, Startup India, entrepreneurship has come to fore. But I want you to have a nostalgic look and talk about entrepreneurship as it was in the 80s and the entrepreneurship as it exists now. I'm sure you've got lots of juicy stories, but perhaps one or two things which capture the flavor.
So yeah, PG, the thing that comes to mind immediately is, when we started HCL way back in the mid 70s, we started with 1,75,000 rupees. And at that time, you had to have an office in Bombay. You couldn't rent, you had to buy. So out of the 1,25,000 went to buy an office in Cuff Parade in Bombay, 953 square feet, I still remember, at Regent Chambers. And so the working capital in the company was really 50,000 rupees. 10 years later, when we got together at Udaipur, the 6 founders, and we were celebrating, we had 2,000 people, company was doing quite well. What was strange was that the 1,25,000 we had invested in real estate in Bombay had probably given us a better return than the 50,000 we had invested in the company. Right. So that was, I just want to give you an idea of, that was real entrepreneurship. That was what it meant in those days. In fact, the founders did not see any real wealth till they were in the business for about 20 years. So it's very different today. When you look at things today, you've got VC money, you've got a lot of competition, your window of opportunity is much shorter, your time to market becomes much, much more difficult. And actually, what the internet, and if you look at things like Airbnb, Uber, a lot of other such, Ola, what you're doing is looking at available resources that are spare. A house that's empty for 1 month when you go for a holiday, you can monetize it in some way. So we are actually optimizing our resources, optimizing our infrastructure. And we've now got technology that allows us to do it. And so you're going to see a lot more of this happen. I had someone talk to me the other day about setting up a laundry service where he's got housewives whose washing machines are not fully idle most of the time, and they can use those washing machines for people who don't have the time to do it and are willing to pay a certain amount to get it done. I mean, you can get to that point as long as you've got the process to handle it. So I think entrepreneurship as it was then was very different. As it is now is actually completely different. And with technology changing so fast, new ideas, new opportunities, new possibilities are coming in all the time. Businesses have to adapt and have to adapt really quickly. I mean, we've seen huge companies like Kodak go down because film went away to digital. I mean, you're going to see that happen more and more over time with a lot of companies. And I think the opportunity is there for the young people to go grab it. And that's why when we look at new products today, there's one way you sell to the baby boomers, which is people like me. There's one way you sell to the millennials, and there's another way you sell to the new generation, whatever you call them, the Z generation, Z generation, Y generation, whatever you call them. And you have to make your message is different. What you're trying to sell them is different. The product, in a way, has to look different because they have different choices that they're buying. So I think the world has changed a lot from what it was, 50 years ago when we started this thing. I think it's a lot more fun today, because it's not just computers. I think computers, as CP mentioned, has become the infrastructure. You've now got biotechnology, you've got nanotechnology, you've got lots of things coming in where computation is the basis on which all this will become new products, new ideas that hopefully will make my life easier as I get older. Thanks.
That's really very well put, Arjun. We have a message, Raji, from one of your mentors. So may I request that Dr. Karan Singh's video be played, please?
deserve the award because he has made a substantial contribution to the growth of the Indian IT sector by creating skilled manpower to drive its momentum. He is the chairman and co-founder of NIIT Ltd, which became a global leader in skills and talent development around the world. He is not only known in India, but in many countries of the world, the NIIT has made a substantial contribution. He also set up some time ago a university, a technological university, if you like to call it, in Mahindra, in Rajasthan, called the NIIT University, or the NU as we call it. And he wanted me to be chancellor of that university, and I agreed because he and his father had been involved with my family for a long time. And I have known him ever since he was a very young man, and I've watched his rise to stardom, as it were, with great pleasure. So I agreed to become chancellor of this university. It was a greenfield university, there was nothing there at all. But in 10 years, I saw the way that that university came up, brick by brick, literally. Because every year when I went, I could see the new construction. And under the guidance of Rajendra Pawar and his excellent team of technologists and intellectuals, this has become now a very significant technological university. So Rajendra Pawar has made several contributions through NIIT and through the university to the Indian technological scene. I wish him well in the future. I hope he goes from strength to strength. I'm sure that he's still a young man. He's got a long way to go. He will continue to make his contribution towards the development of India, and particularly in this technological age, he will help millions of people to come to terms with the DQTech. He has already received the Padma Bhushan, and hopefully he will receive higher honors in the years ahead. My warm greetings to him and to all his organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. CP, I have one last question for you. You talked about the India advantage. So, what will be those things which will sustain the India advantage in your opinion? 1 minute on that, please.
A long answer, but I think what will change India is the prevalence of technology in everything that an entrepreneur is doing. We have seen the 18 unicorns that India has produced. My belief is that the second part which will change India is if we realize that nothing will become, allow us to become the prowesses that we want to become unless everything has AI inside in India. I mean, every government department, every railway, every aircraft will have to start legislating the way we made policy changes to create a COBOL engineer or to create an IT. I think we will have to legislate AI inside for everyone. And number third, my belief is that this geopolitical situation, the wars around us, actually convert into India advantage. So the more aspirational we are, I think we will, instead of just being a service provider or services provider, we will start becoming process as a service, product as a service, and in many cases, we might see the technology products being made by India, made in India. I mean, I love this Atmanirbhar thing. I love the way India is trying to tackle 5G by the India stack. I think that will give a huge impetus to India. PG, I have to leave. So is it okay if I add a few words for Raji?
Please.
I know
Please.
It is
Yeah, please.
Rajiv. I mean, I can only say differently that both Niti and you have showered your love on me and Anu. And for us, every moment that we have spent with Niti and you is the most treasured moment. Please continue to share your affection. We are genuinely delighted with your new promotion of being, Dataquest Lifetime Achievement of the Year. But I know the best of Raji is yet to come, and we want to be there as cheerleaders. So congratulations again, Raji.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Being with us today on this occasion. Arjun, you've been talking about, you're now an investor, okay? And you've been investing in a lot of companies that are essentially looking at the transformation of India, the transformation of Bharat, I should say, healthcare, education, energy, and so on. So, your views on what is going to be the next decade as far as these changes are concerned in terms of the social fabric of the country.
So the first thing is I don't invest, my son does the investments because, that's not the part that I understand at all. I'm an ops kind of person. But yes, I think what I want to do and what I'm trying to do is to work to leverage technology or to use technology to leverage the quality of education and healthcare and to provide better outcomes, especially in healthcare, better outcomes to the economically underprivileged. And really, COVID has given it a big, big boost because a lot of our telemedicine solutions, a lot of the other solutions are actually starting to, I mean, right now, I don't know how to put it, but growth is the problem. And I mean, that's a very nice thing to say when you're in a startup. But the bottom line is, if you look at what's happening in India, is because the economy is picking up, the number of people who can afford to come into the so-called healthcare system is going up 12 to 18%, depending on what the rate of the economy is. But the number of doctors is only going up by 6%. And if I want new doctors, I have to, and I invest today, I'll get them 10 years later. And we're not seeing that investment. So every doctor I know, and probably you know, is also overworked today. So what is going to happen over 10 years or more when these doctors have a lot more patients? So I think what we're trying to do is, and VP mentioned it, is use technology, AI, stuff like that, to try and, how do I put it, reduce or take away the non-patient facing time that doctors have so that they can see more patients because they are the ultimate. I mean, I can get machines to do analysis and diagnostics for you, but I don't think, at least our generation, will trust a machine. They still want a doctor, an individual, to do it for them. But you're going to see it happen. I think the first area you're going to see it happen is in X-ray and MRI imaging, where machine learning based AI systems are going to actually be able to predict much better than doctors on where and what the problems are likely to be so that the doctors can finally sign off on it. It's already happening. And you're going to start seeing more and more of that infiltrate into other medical disciplines where technology will support doctors to become more efficient, to see more patients, and to be more accurate. Right? It's going to take time, but it's going to happen. And in India, especially when you're remote, in a remote village, you can get a doctor, if you can get a doctor to consult, and if they can print out the prescription on a Bluetooth printer right there, and especially with our connectivity on the internet and phones, 2G at least is available everywhere. We can actually make this work. And it's starting to work. You can put, telemedicine solutions on trains. So if someone is not feeling well on a train, they can consult with the doctor, let's say at a railway hospital. And at the next stop, you can have whatever is necessary available for them in case you need something at that point. You can do it at railway stations. So the ability to connect with the doctor after going through an asynchronous system that actually does the diagnostics for you so that the doctor doesn't have to spend time just sitting in front of the terminal waiting for the next patient. It's going to be quite amazing. And we are starting to see that in India. When you look at education, of course, digitizing content is one big thing. But you look at the US today, they claim some 25% of the kids have some learning disability, whether it's visual, hearing, ADHD, some learning disability. And you have to adapt that digital content that the publishers have to be able to be accessible to them. And so accessibility is a big thing that's going to come up. And it's going to come up in countries like India, where unfortunately, because of the past, we have so many stunted kids. So we need to find a way, if we want to educate them, we need to find a way of doing it. So I think you're going to see technology starting to play a bigger and bigger role as we go forward, especially in these two areas. I mean, of course, it's going to play a role in every area, but I'm actually just looking at these two areas, mainly healthcare and to some extent education, where we're trying to see how we can leverage technology. Raji, of course, is the best guy to talk about education, so I'm not spending time on that. But definitely in healthcare, we're starting to see technology make a difference. And you'll probably hear about it in the next few years to see how this is happening. Thanks.
Arjun, thanks a lot for that. Raji, I mentioned earlier that we'll talk about the new bug later on. So this is the time now. COVID has made some permanent, forks in the road. Technology, which was sort of optional in the past, has now become mandatory. We have woken up to the fact that we cannot avoid that, and therefore there is going to be more and more deep tech which is going to get into each and everything. So how do we prepare for it? How do youngsters prepare for it? How do companies prepare for it? How does the government prepare for it?
So I think the first good news is that the government itself is scaling up its capacity to deal with deep tech. More and more IITs, a large number of triple ITs, many colleges have good capability. So one part is that the physical institutions are growing, capacity is growing, and we need to do more and more. But let's look at the digital infrastructure. I was talking about just a few years ago, 0.5 megabit per second. Today, mobile internet is at 10 plus megabits. And the internet penetration is now 700 million people. So the picture is changing. And since 2015, when we started talking of the Industry 4.0, which is AI, machine learning, IoT, cloud, augmented reality, virtual reality, all these are newer things which will sit on the top of powerful infrastructure to make things more human. So I can say that we can see ourselves around ourselves that in addition to government institutions, in the last decade or so, we are also seeing a large number of our successful entrepreneurs adding on to what the Tatas and Birlas have done, but in much larger number that newer institutions are being set up. So I see this period of this last decade and the next one or two as a period when India's new Ivy League universities are getting formed to supplement the effort that the government does. And these universities, and ours is just one of them, many, are looking at deep tech. They are looking at quantum. They have to look at biocomputing. They have to look at cyber. They have to look at sentiment analysis. There are so many things. They have to look at the future at 5G and 6G. While companies such as NIIT Limited are looking at NIIT Digital to teach skills and languages, which is to do the day job and then to look at the future as well. And I think so we are seeing capacity building happening across the board to build deep tech, to prepare for it, and to go forward. And I also want to say that for myself, we see Arjun talked so convincingly and nicely about the whole startup phenomena and the new mindset of the youth. For us, an aspiration at the university is to be the school of startups. And I have to mention that the university benefits and has benefited enormously from the wisdom of people in our industry. Even today, the board has So Mittal as a board member. Mohan Reddy used to be on our board, and we have Arjun Malhotra, of course. And our industry is coming to work with the universities much better. New initiatives are happening. So I think the capacity of the nation to build superior talent is going up. The capacity of the nation to build infrastructure to reach every village, I think it has been talked this time in the new education policy. There is a commitment to take the connection to the last village and to give a device to the last child. That needs to be speeded up because the caliber and potential of every child is sitting there. And I think we have to unleash it. So that's what we have to do.
So thanks a lot, Raji, for sort of, showing the future direction in which things will unravel. With that, we come to an end to this panel discussion. I thank CP, I thank Arjun, I thank you for a very invigorating discussion. I think to the best of our abilities, we've sort of tried to capture the nostalgia of these last 40 years. With that, Raji, while you stay on the stage, Arjun and I will take leave. I will request Ibrahim Ahmed to come and read the citation.
Sir, you are on mute.
Yes. Thank you so much, PG. It's really an honor to be reading the citation for Mr. Pawar. Obviously, all the great people we heard today have sort of encapsulated whatever we wanted to say in the citation. In fact, we had initially a citation which was about running into 5 pages, and then we shortened it, and then we further shortened it, and then PG was putting pressure that no, we don't have time, please pick up the only important points. However, before I read out an even concise form of the citation that we have, I will just narrate a story about Mr. Pawar, which I saw personally with my eyes several years back. I don't know if he would even remember. So I live in Gurgaon in NCR, Delhi, and I was going to office, and it was monsoons, middle of the monsoons. And then I saw that there was a huge jam, and there was a crossing, and on all sides of the roads on the crossing, there was a jam, and I think one side was half a kilometer, another side was another half a kilometer. And then we waited in the car for some time, and then I got down and walked up to see what's happening. And there I saw, you will not believe it, I saw a tall, lean person who had rolled up his sleeves and pulled up his pants, and he was actually monitoring the traffic, and he was trying to get the jam finished, and it was Mr. Pawar. And I saw that some people were telling him that, please sir, you carry on, you might be missing your important meeting and all. But he continued there. I think he stayed there for almost half an hour till the jam was completely cleared, and then only he left. So that's the kind of heroes that we are honoring today. And these heroes are not just leaders and visionaries, but they are people who really practice and believe in the hands-on approach. And I'm really very proud. Sir, the Dataquest Awards jury was unanimous in its recognition of your outstanding contribution in organizing and building the Indian IT training industry from where it was over 40 years ago to today. You have been a father figure for the entire tech training community in India and the ICT industry through the various initiatives, and that also shows your commitment to give back to the industry, the country, and the society. Your current roles in various initiatives will continue to help in building the technology training ecosystem, not just in India, but globally. The Dataquest Awards jury and the editors of Dataquest and CyberMedia are very proud to confer the Dataquest Lifetime Achievement Award of the year 2019 on Mr. Rajendra S Pawar, the chairman and co-founder of NIIT Limited and founder of NIIT University. Thank you so much, sir. And now congratulations, and can I now invite you to say a few words on this award, Mr. Pawar.
Thank you so much for your very kind words. But if you don't clear the traffic, you get stuck, so you got to do it. And one has to do it more and more with the passage of time. So in any case, thank you so much. Among the dark clouds of COVID, this event is a silver lining for me. And thanks to PG and all his wonderful folks, this special way of celebrating makes it possible for me to reach many people who would otherwise have been stuck in traffic or at work. And I could never have reached so many of my mentors, colleagues, relatives, and friends through your digital event. I received this award on behalf of thousands of my colleagues of the NIIT family, NIITians of the past and NIITians of the present, all of whom put organization building above all else. Led remarkably well by my colleagues Vijay Thadani, Rajendran, Arvind Thakur. Along this journey of over 4 decades, I've had the good fortune of getting unconditional support, advice, guidance, and affection from so many of you. I'll make every possible effort to thank each of you in person, not through this digital method. I owe the launch of my entrepreneurial career to Shiv Nadar, entrepreneur and mentor par excellence, and to a lot of guidance from Arjun, who I used to work with in my early years in HCL. I have received blessings and the affection of Mr. F.C. Kohli, whose passion, wisdom, and tenacity has set very high standards for all of us in the industry. To all the members of my family and my extended family, I will say this. While my preoccupation with work came at the cost of my not giving enough time to you, each and every one of you has continued to shower endless affection and love. Thank you ever so much from the bottom of my heart. There is one person, however, who needs to be at the center of receiving all the credit today, and I mean all the credit that I am being credited for. And that is the love of my life, Neeti Pawar. So 42 years you've been by my side as a perfect partner. Solid as a rock, selfless to the core, a fountainhood of affection for all those whom I love, teaching us to value every small thing in life, a true symbol of integrity, a gentle, reasonably gentle critic of my mistakes, but the first to appreciate every little job well done, and a fierce supporter of every just cause. I wish that we are together again in our next life, but with the roles reversed, so that I may care for you as selflessly as you have cared for me in this life. But in this life, as many people said, there is still so much to do. While COVID has got miseries galore, there is one hugely positive, unintended consequence, and that is the rapid transformation of the world into everything digital, the pivot to digital. The decade of the 20s will be remembered as the decade of digital. For all of us in the IT community, it is a decade in which we have the responsibility to help individuals and organizations make a rapid, painless, and beneficial transaction. This decade of digital is important, is a very important part of the 21st century, which I call the century of the mind, and therefore India's century. Now, coming back to Earth, and as I end, I do want to express my mood of the moment, and I'll use the mother tongue language option to say a few words in a little poem I've created. कभी लगता था सूरज अब ढलने लगा, खूब बुलंदी के बाद वक्त संभलने लगा, ऐसा लगता था इतना कुछ करने के बाद वक्त आया है आराम पलने लगा, तभी वक्त ने अद्भुत सा मोड़ जो लिया, दो चुनौतियां मेरे सामने आ गई, एक भयानक कोविड का ऐलान आ गया और डेटा क्वेस्ट से रिटायरमेंट का फरमान आ गया. दिस इज द डेटा क्वेस्ट अचीवमेंट अवार्ड. सो एक भयानक कोविड का ऐलान आ गया और डेटा क्वेस्ट से रिटायरमेंट का फरमान आ गया. गहरी सोच से अचानक जब आंख फिर खुली तो अंदर से एक आवाज ने कहा, उठो दोस्त, पिक्चर अभी बाकी है. This same thought is captured beautifully in his lines by poet Hafiz Jalandhari, made famous by the legendary singer Malika Pukhraj in the 1950s, and I'll recite a few lines. हवा भी खुश गवार है, गिलों पे भी निखार है, तरन्नुम में हजार है, बहारे पुर बहार है, कहाँ चला है साकिया, इधर तो लौट इधर तो आ, अभी तो मैं जवान हूँ, अभी तो मैं जवान हूँ, अभी तो मैं जवान हूँ, अभी तो मैं जवान हूँ. So with that, Dataquest, thank you for this very special moment, and a very big thank you to each and every one of you who joined us today.
Sir, you are on mute.
PG, you have to unmute.
Sorry. I was saying that was good to hear the poet in you and the singer in you, hidden talents. But it was really wonderful, and बिल्कुल अभी तो जवान है, industry भी जवान है, और many more miles to go. That's something which is definitely there. So look forward to many such occasions. I'm sorry we are doing a virtual trophy, because we do not have a physical award. But what we will ensure is that this once the entire thing opens, then we will have the trophy delivered to you. So once again, with that, thank you very much for everybody, including the audience. It's been really a wonderful to have you there, Raji, to talk about a few things, and over to you, Ibrahim.
Congratulations once again, Mr. Pawar, and really happy and proud that we were able to recognize and bring to the world once again the great work and contribution that you have done. Thank you so much. And congratulations. I would also like to especially thank Mr. Arjun Malhotra and Mr. Gurnani for being here with us to talk about the past and the future of the Indian IT industry. And I would also like to especially thank all the people who joined us online to listen to the great stalwarts and the makers of the Indian IT industry. As I said, we have on the digital world, we have split this award into three parts. So we will shortly be reconvening where we will present the Dataquest IT Person of the Year and the Pathbreaker Award. Thank you so much for the hard work that the entire backend team put together. Thank you so much. And congratulations once again, and goodbye to all of you from CyberMedia and Dataquest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.